Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this wonderful early childhood summit. It's so exciting to be here with you, and it's exciting to see so many people. I'm Barbara Ferrer. I'm the Executive Director of the Boston Public Health Commission. We're one of the proud sponsors of this City Summit. The first thing I want to do is just start with some thanks and some appreciation. First for all of you who I know are working tirelessly across the city and for some of you across the state, doing wonderful things for children every day. And I want to just have all of you join me in a round of applause thanking you for all your hard effort. I don't think you need to hear from me or from anybody else, but the work you do makes a tremendous difference. And it's outstanding in its quality, but most importantly, it's setting a new direction for the city, for the nation, and really for the world about the importance of focusing on the early years. Thrive in 5 is really the mayor's visionary expression of a commitment to children and families. And it represents both the leadership he has shown in bringing together folks from across the city, both private and public, ensuring that we work together to make sure that all of our children are well prepared for school. Research tells us unequivocally that the health and development of early childhood lays the foundation for lifelong health and well-being. And we see the effects of a toxic environment in those early years when we look at outcomes that range from ability to be ready to school, reproductive health, and lifetime exposures to poor health outcomes. Research and experience teaches us that children will thrive in healthy families, and healthy families will thrive only in healthy communities. And children don't develop in segments. The mind, the body, and the spirit require the same nurturing environment to grow. It's this holistic view that underlies the work of Thrive in 5, which brings all of the city human services together with United Way, Boston Medical Center, and Children's Hospital, along with private sector funders and supporters, to promote nurturing communities through its Ready Schools and Ready Systems initiatives, healthy families through its Ready Families efforts, including the wonderful Kellogg Foundation-funded Boston Children Thrive project, which links agencies in 5 communities to help families find support and resources. And we directly promote the growth and development of young children. Sometimes people say, what's the link between health? And for most people, I think the first place we go is children who aren't healthy are children who are going to struggle to learn. But I want to say, as a health commissioner, it applies in the other direction as well. Children who learn and learn well are often going to be healthy adults. So it's one reason why, as a health department, we're so deeply committed to supporting the work in Thrive in 5. And I want to acknowledge that, for us it has meant shifting a focus. And I think for some of you it's meant the same. Understanding the profound difference that work makes in the early years has meant looking at what we do at the health department differently. And I'm proud to say that under the tremendous leadership of Dr. Deborah Allen and her partners in both the state and many of the organizations represented in this room, we developed this last year 2 new public health initiatives that address child social and emotional health, aspects of health that we know are critical to school success. Research tells us that children with emotional, behavioral, and developmental disorders actually miss more school than children with other special needs. And the research also tells us that this pattern starts early. For example, children in preschool in Massachusetts are 34 times more likely to be expelled for behavioral issues than children in regular school. 34 times. If we can engage families in appropriate, supportive, non-judgmental mental health supports and services before a pattern sets in, we believe that we can improve not only readiness for school, but long-term retention. Our programs, which are called Boston Launch and My Child, serve children birth up to the early school years. and equally serve the families of those children by strengthening the pediatric medical home to meet the social and developmental health needs of all children. We fund an early childhood mental health clinician and a family partner in 7 sites, pediatric sites across this city. And we're particularly excited about the role that the family partner is playing. Having a parent who actually has experienced similar situations with their own child and can be a strong advocate for the family pays huge dividends in helping those families connect to the services that they need. We know that having a child who acts out or having a child that's withdrawn or not on the developmental level of other children is painful, lonely, and a sad experience for many parents. Our family partners destigmatize that experience. They serve as a mentor, they coach, they're advocates, and they're case managers, all the time while working in close collaboration with skilled clinicians and the pediatric team. It's too early for us to have statistically viable results, but both our teams and the pediatric sites report that there's wonderful new opportunities for the engagement of families to address problems early on and to avert school failure at the root. The goal for our work, of course, and yours, is sustainability and making the case for the reimbursement by health insurance companies for early childhood mental health intervention and family partnering by proving the effectiveness of these projects. We've had tremendous partners in our work. I want to acknowledge the leadership that has been shown both at the state level by the Department of Public Health and by the Executive Office of Health and Human Services, all who saw Thrive in 5 as an indicator of a Boston vision around early childhood that could be replicated across the state. We have wonderful teams working on these projects with local and state health advisors, including all of the great staff and advisors for Thrive in 5. And most especially, I want to thank the sites. It's now sort of my honor and my pleasure to introduce one person who in this city has been a champion for children from the time he started working here as a city councilor. Many of you know him as Mayor Thomas M. Menino. I also, I'm lucky to know him as the person who is my direct boss. And I want to say he is absolutely the best person I've ever worked for. And the reason I say that is every day he insists that those people who are working with him focus on what's most important. And I know you all know this well. For him, what's most important are our children. And the fact that he has shown courage in his leadership to take on difficult issues and has stepped forward to bring everybody together in the public and private sector to insist that we start the work early and that we focus on allowing everybody to have the opportunities they need to live their life to their full potential, I think is unique for a mayor. And I want to thank him and honor him by both asking him to join us, but also expressing our deep appreciation for his work and his leadership.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and thank you for that kind introduction. It seems like Barbara and I are on a trail this week. We've done about 5 events together, and but it's all been important because it's about public health, it's about children. And so I'm really happy to be here this morning about the Early Childhood Summit, and I think we have some folks here who are going to really give us a lot of information, but Arthur Rolnick, who's from the University of Minnesota. When you listen to his talk this morning, he'll really enlighten you about the issues that are going on in our country and some of the ideas that he has and how we can improve this issue of early childhood. But first of all, this is like church. There's 2 pews open. You guys are standing over there. Come on over here. We'll accept you. You don't want to? Okay, good. I'm Mike Durkin, right, from United Way of Massachusetts. Thanks, Michael. Boston is so lucky, really, to have Barbara Ferrer as our Public Health Commissioner and to have Superintendent Carol Johnson as our Superintendent of Schools in Boston. She'll be speaking later. But I also want to thank Northeastern University and John Tobin's representing Northeastern today with us. Thank you. Thank you, John. Barbara and Carol make such sure we focus on kids being healthy and ready to learn before they get to our school. I'm excited to be here this morning for 3 different reasons. And those 3 reasons are, first, to thank each of you for the work you do with our young children across our city. Our children really are the key to Boston's continued prosperity. Your work with kids now will impact generations to come. Boston needs each and every one of you to keep up this good fight, so really don't leave a single child behind. Second, I get to show you how we are all learning to speak the same language in Boston. You know I'm not a fancy talker. We understand that? So let's have the kids show you how it's done. I think they're trying to say that the stove is hot. That came out of the creative department, City Hall. Oh, no. Oh. See, little kids are really thinking and reacting and learning every second. I tell you, I've learned so much about what happens to a child's mind in the first few years. I never thought I'd be talking about things like brain architecture, but it does matter. In those first few years, the actual architecture of the brain is being built. I think we're like a house. Sure, we need walls and furniture, but those don't mean much. You don't have a foundation built on it. We also know that young child's environment, relationships in their early years can make that foundation a strong one or a weak one. Learning starts long before a child enters school. We get it now that education reform isn't just a K-12 issue, but one that must span from the cradle through college and into a career later on. That is so, so important. You know, the old way of thinking is, hey, we'll get them eventually at the high school level, the middle school level. Folks. We've got to get them at birth. We've got the parent and child into a program early on. So we got to think about some of these programs we have out there and how we change them to make sure that early childhood is in part of it. We have a neighborhood in Boston where we have 114 nonprofits. Not one of them deals with early childhood. Not one of them. And so I told my team at City Hall, I said, okay, we got to change that around, folks. We've got to get to them early on. It's so much harder and more expensive to fix educational problems later on than it is to prevent them. We have to work together to prevent problems for our kids, to make sure that low-income kids don't start kindergarten already years behind their middle-class peers in language and social skills. That's why we created Thrive in 5, to make sure all of our children get off to a strong start. I make early childhood a permanent priority in our city. Through our partnership, the United Way, Thrive in 5 has turned all of what we are saying into action for our young people. And you'll see over the next several months how we're going to, the action plan for that. And speaking of action, the third reason I'm thrilled to open this summit was announced with the Boston Opportunity Agenda. Thrive in 5 is receiving $136,000 of new money to support school readiness. The gift is from the Kraft Family Foundation, Robert Beal and Howard Walk, 3 leaders who have been with the Opportunity Agenda since its beginning. Like all the Thrive in 5 funds raised, the majority of this new money will go directly to support children and families in the neighborhoods, making sure that everywhere young children go, especially the most vulnerable kids, they get support for our school readiness program. This means making sure families have never left the community get them to use the Children's Museum or the library. We'll go in those places for enrichment. This means small businesses creating play spaces so kids who don't have books at home can receive free books and read while mom or dad or grandma get their haircut or shop for groceries. Our reading program that Teresa Lynn runs, we're going to have this Storymobile in the neighborhoods. We hope to give out 70,000 books this summer at 70 different locations because we want to make sure during the summer months the kids don't go backwards. You know, if they don't do any reading during the summer months, they lose a whole grade. We want to make sure that we have reading programs in all our playgrounds to give them the opportunity, those young people, so they can continue to learn because education does not stop when that school bell closes down schools at the end of June. It has to continue. This means making sure that informal child care providers, you know, those neighbors taking care of the local kids, become connected to professional development in order to improve the care and education that they may provide. In the end, this means a brighter future for our children and our city. And so to all of you, I want to say really thank you. You're on the forefront. Last night we had a little event and I talked about a meeting I had in Washington a week ago with the Justice Department. They on youth violence. And all they wanted to talk about was enforcement. You know, more than enforcement to our young people. Intervention and prevention. Intervention is Thrive in 5. And that's what we're going to continue to do. We as a city are very proud of it. When we went down there, we didn't have all the police officers with stripes and stars and all that stuff making the presentations. We had Barbara Ferrer, the Public Health Commission, Daphne Griffin from the Boston Center Youth and Families, Andrea Perry from Youth Connects. Then I let the police commissioner say a few words at the end. Because I wanted the folks of the Justice Department to see the folks who have their feet on the ground, who are dealing with some of these kids. And that's not just lock them up and say we we have a problem. We know we have a problem. Why they have a problem? For the most part, because they didn't have the education to make the right choices. It's a family situation too, folks. So I think when a keynote speaker, he'll talk about those things as we go along this morning. But to all of you, thank you for what you're doing. It's very encouraging to have this many people here on a Thursday morning. I thought you'd all be out practicing your run for Monday, but I guess you're not. That's why I won't throw my cane away, so I have a good excuse not to run Monday. But I just want to say this is great. I want to acknowledge the man that has led this work for the last 2 years. Where's John Libet? Where's John? John, thank you for your commitment to young children and your leadership in Thrive in 5. Thank you for the last 2 years. We really appreciate that. Now I want to welcome our partner. Where are you going? There's somebody else. We have a lot of partners, Michael. You think you're the only one? Let me just say, we couldn't have a better guy at the United Way at this time, and the city's history and with the issues we have. And this guy who's going to follow, Mike Durkin, he's a wonderful guy. He's really rooted in what to improve the young people's lives in our city. And I want to personally thank him for all the work he's done with the city on so many different issues. Mike Durkin, come on, Michael.
Thanks. Well, good morning to everybody, and Mayor Tom, thanks for the introduction. I wasn't here in the early years of your political life, so I wasn't sure if that was a political commentary. Those two kids, Tom Menino, the early years, I didn't really know what was going on there, but sorry. Really and truly, it's great to be here today for a couple reasons. One, to give you all an update on Thrive in 5, and you'll hear that throughout the day. But also, I think, to galvanize all of us around the work that Barbara Ferrer, Mayor Menino, the city, all of us have come together around. There's really no greater leadership, and when you hear Barbara and the mayor talk about kids, they're not talking about a department of children. They're talking about a department of everything, looking at how do we touch kids and families more effectively. And I think that's the key that we've got to be focused on here today. Also, just to resonate with Mayor Menino, John, thanks for the leadership you provided. You know, when you start out a great venture, you need somebody at the wheel who can begin to drive through some of the rocks and shoals. You've done that for us. You've also had a great partner with Randall Rucker, who's chaired the Leadership Advisory Council for Thrive in 5 since its inception. Thank you. Well, you know that there is no bigger issue for us than the issue we're talking about today, successful and positive child development. We can measure it a number of ways, we see it on the ground, and we understand it conceptually. But I think the question that I'd like to put in front of you today is, do you want to be meaningful on this issue? Because we can talk an awful lot. You're going to hear today Art Rolnick, somebody who can talk a lot about this issue, but has done things and has led others to do something around this issue. So if we're going to be true to what the goals and what the vision of Thrive in 5 is, that by 2018 we're going to make sure that all of Boston's kids, from all the backgrounds they bring, are going to have the best opportunities to enter kindergarten with positive options and then to move beyond with positive options for the future. We're all going to have to come together. This is the time to do it, even though some of our funding sources and some of our own strategies are challenged from time to time. We need to be in on the game. Whether it's because of, as Barbara talked about, the challenges around mental health issues facing kids if they aren't properly identified and put into worthwhile services. Whether it's the things that the mayor was talking about youth violence and how do we prevent that starting at the very early ages. This is the time, and this is the time to act right now. But we got to be meaningful about this. Several years ago, or more than several years ago, when my kids were in elementary school, I had a chance to walk through the teacher's lounge one time. And there was a sign in the teacher's lounge that said, "New insights without changed behaviors are meaningless." So we're going to get some new insights today. But if you walk out of here, and if I walk out of here with, geez, that's a keen insight, that's something I ought to ruminate on, that's really not going to be good enough. So what we've got to do is think about the actions we're going to take. One of the actions that I think we've got to take is look at who else can we get into the game on this. Now, if you go back and talk to the person sitting at your desk next to you, or in the cubicle or down the hall, I would tell you that's not meaningful enough. What we've got to do to be meaningful is to get the unusual and the unexpected people into the room and into this conversation. Does anybody here own a bank? Okay, I don't think so. Some of you have worked for a bank in the past. We need folks who own banks and bakeries and lawyers and doctors. We need everybody in this game. So what I'd ask you to do is take the insights that we've got today and do something meaningful with them, but don't do something meaningful on the way to the parking lot with the other people who heard the same stuff. Let's go out and be a little evangelical in what we're trying to do and take this message not just to the streets, but to the people who can help make the changes that we're talking about. That's what I'd ask you for here today. You've got a real treat this morning that Art Rolnick is able to be here with us. As the mayor said, Art's with the University of Minnesota, where he's a senior fellow and director of the Human Capital Research Collaborative at the Humphrey School of Government at the University of Minnesota. Art has had a long and very powerful background at the Federal Reserve of Minneapolis. We had a reception last night where Eric Rosengren, who's the president of the Boston Fed, was there, and he said that Art brings passion to his research work. You'll know that he brings passion to the work around this issue as you hear about his talk of what they've been able to do in Minnesota. We also hear he brings a heck of a lot of passion to the tennis court and even can beat Rosengren from time to time. I think that was told offline. But really and truly, what Art's been able to do and the story of what Minneapolis has been able to do is a great framework for us. So what I'd ask you today to think about is, again, take the insights, listen. It's a powerful story of what success can look like. But then let's not waste too much time ruminating. Let's think about how we can be meaningful to make a change, to help support the movement for our kids. Thanks very much. Join me in welcoming Art Rolnick.
Thank you, Mike. And thank you for inviting me here. It's an honor. You should know back in the early 80s, I was on sabbatical from the Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis, and a dear friend of mine is chair of the Department of Economics at BC, so I got to spend a year here, and my wife and I fell in love with Boston and New England, and whenever I get a chance, I'm here. I used to park near the football stadium, and I'd walk from the economics department to the parking lot, and I'd see this young fella throwing a football at 80, 90 yards. I'm thinking, who is this guy? And that was Doug Flutie, and helped to change things quite a bit at Boston College. So anyways, I'm glad to be here. I'm also thrilled to hear from your mayor. I mean, you got leadership like that. You got a real chance to make a difference on this issue. On this issue, and I've been speaking around the country on this issue for many years, the first question I often get is, how does somebody at the Federal Reserve Bank who has studied business cycles and worries about inflation and unemployment and which way interest rates are going to go, how do you get involved in early childhood education? Where did that come from? So the first thing I'm going to do this morning is give you the answer to that question, how I got involved. Then I'll take you through the research. The takeaway this morning, or one of the main takeaways that I'd like you to think about is that I want you to think about early childhood development as economic development. And I'm going to try to convince you, although I have a hunch this is not going to be a difficult crowd to convince, that it's the highest possible public return we can get from our investment. So that's going to be the takeaway. Although I'm not going to leave you there, I'm going to conclude with a discussion of how to take this research and put it into practice. I'm going to talk about some of the work that we're doing in Minnesota, although it's catching on around the country, and I've got the interest of the White House on this issue. We created something called the Minnesota Early Learning Foundation, and I'll talk you through what we're doing in Minnesota and how we can take this research, be very effective, and bring it to scale. Bottom line for me is about scalability. So, how did I get started? There's a group of us that meet in downtown Minneapolis about once a month, and we'll invite a CEO or we'll invite an author or somebody from the media just to talk about their passion, whatever it may be. About 10 years ago, we invited a fellow by the name of Todd Otis. He was a former state senator. He Now, Carol's shaking her head. He was now, and he still is, the director, the executive director of an organization called Ready for K, Ready for Kindergarten. It was an organization that a former governor, Republican governor of our state, Al Quie, helped to start, along with former mayor of Minneapolis, Democrat Don Frazier. And Todd gets up and he's giving this talk to us about the importance of early childhood development and education. And after his talk, I actually wasn't that happy with it. I raised my hand and I said, Todd, basically you're making a moral argument. You're saying this is the right thing to do, and I don't disagree with that. But you could make a moral argument about investing more in K through 12. You can make a moral argument about investing more in higher education. You can make a moral argument about reducing crime or reducing pollution, and the list goes on and on. And your mayors and your governors and your county commissioners and your senators and your president of the United States, they need more than moral arguments. They need a way to allocate limited resources, as we all know. So I said to them, you really should try to make an economic argument. You know, it seemed, I'm the economist, obviously I would say something like that, but it seems like you'd have a lot more force behind your argument. Well, as I tell people, that was my mistake. Because shortly after that, the governor and the former governor mayor start calling me up and say, Rolnick, we agree with you. Why don't you come on the board and do the research? And I say to them, look guys, my specialty is pre-Civil War banking. What do I know about early childhood education? But it's kind of hard when two influential people like that are twisting your arm, and so I agreed to go on the board and do the background paper. I went back to my office at the bank, and I have a young colleague there by the name of Rob Grunwald, and I said, Rob, and he's our education outreach person. So I said, Rob, I've committed us to do this work. But I said to him, don't worry about it. It'll take us a few months. We'll go to the literature. We'll summarize it. We'll give this to Ready for K, and we'll be done. And so we spent roughly 3 months with some prodding from Todd Otis, produced this paper. We give it to Ready for K. Little did we know they'd take that paper and push it out around the country, in fact, around the world. So a month later, not a month later, 6 months later, I found myself at as a keynote speaker at the National Governors Conference in Orlando, Florida, with Jeb Bush, then Governor Jeb Bush, hosting it. A year after that, my wife and I are in Istanbul as the guest of the Prime Minister of Turkey. 600 delegates from all over the Middle East and Europe. The Queen of Jordan is there, all on early childhood education. About 2 years after that, Mike Milken, who runs this global, international global economic conference in Beverly Hills, California, invites me out there. And I'm on a panel with Andre Agassi. Now, I'm a tennis player of sorts, and there's Andre Agassi. Why Andre Agassi? Because Andre Agassi has started a charter school in Las Vegas in a very poor Hispanic neighborhood. And he's doing wonderful things in that neighborhood. And of course, we started talking about adding an early ed program to that. One footnote, I had a nice picture of Andre and I on the panel, and I sent that to Eric, your president of the Minneapolis Fed, before I played him tennis. I said, here's my new tennis coach. I told him. Didn't work, he still beat me. And finally, probably the chance I had to be the most influential, I got a chance to speak at the Aspen Ideas Festival. If you ever get a chance to go to the Aspen Ideas Festival, go. It's an amazing week-long conference with speakers from all kinds of disciplines, very famous people. You get former presidents, former Supreme Court justices. I was there speaking on this topic, and a fellow came up to me afterwards and asked if I'd be willing to talk to his brother. His brother's a congressperson. This is in September of 2008. Sat down to dinner. His brother was Rahm Emanuel. Had a half-hour talk with Rahm Emanuel about early childhood education. Okay, so question, what did we say? What did Rob Grunwald and I say in this essay that got all this attention? I'll take you through the main points. We basically looked at existing literature. And there's longitudinal studies which intervene with kids at very early years in their lives, providing them a high-quality early ed program, focusing on the parents. In particular, we looked at what's known as the Perry Preschool Study, which is the famous, well-known study in educational literature on this issue. And what they did in Perry Preschool, they took 120, this was Ypsilanti, Michigan, early 60s, took 123 at-risk families, randomly divided them up into two groups. These are all low-income poverty families. Half the group gets a very high-quality program focused on the parents, master-level teachers, home visits, and then there's a control group. And they follow these kids for 10 years, for 20 years, 30 years. Rob and I had the 30-year data. And we were looking at these results, and it was fairly interesting. We found that the children that were in the program were much less likely to need special ed. They were much less likely to be retained in the first grade, much more likely to be literate by the sixth grade, graduate high school, get a job, pay taxes, stay off of welfare. And this is all in comparison to the control group. And 30 years later, when we compare the control group to the kids who were in this program, the crime rate was down 50%. So Rob and I asked a very simple question, and it wasn't quite asked this way before. Shouldn't surprise you, it's coming from economists. What was the return on the investment? In today's dollars, it was roughly $10,000 per year. It was a 2-year program, 3- and 4-year-olds. So it was a $20,000 investment. What was the return? Well, to calculate a return, you got to put dollar values on all these benefits that I just mentioned. Economists can put dollar values on almost anything. And that's what we did. And then we backed out what the implied rate of interest was on that investment. Now, what we were trying to show is, we thought we would show a pretty good rate of return. What do we mean by that? Well, if you look at the rate of return on the stock market post-World War II, it's about 5.8%. Now, last couple of years, it jumped around a bit, but that's not a bad number, an annual rate of 5.8%. So if we're going to argue that we need to invest more in early childhood development, we're going to take money out of the private sector, we better beat 5.8%. So we go through this calculation, and we back out the numbers, and we get a 16% inflation-adjusted return. So we didn't beat it by a little, we beat it by a lot. And we argued, when our critics got a hold of our paper, that we actually think we took a very conservative estimate because we didn't have data on siblings in the family. Odds are the siblings are doing better if the child who was in the program is doing better. We didn't have data on the income of the parents. Later on, we found out many of these parents were able to go back to school, get a job, and many of them, again, this is anecdotal, but we estimate that it looks like about a 40% increase in the parents' income, because as they become better parents, they become better employees. We didn't have that as part of our calculation. We didn't have the teacher productivity as part of our calculation. I used to teach in inner city Detroit, and I can tell you when the kids came to school and they were ready to learn, I was a terrific teacher. When they hardly knew their names, I failed. Teacher productivity was not in the 16% calculation. We're just starting to get children of the children, and we're pretty sure that we're going to show you that there's a chance here of breaking that intergenerational poverty cycle. We didn't have that data. So in fact, we argue 16% was somewhat conservative. Other critics say, it's one study, small sample. Small sample is hard to get statistically significant results. We did. It's not just one study. There are 4 longitudinal studies, and they all show very high return on investment. So that was our bottom line. As an economic, if you think of this as economic development, now why would you think of this, why am I telling you to think about this as economic development? So let me back up a little. Let me take you back to the early 90s. I got an invitation from Senator Edward Kennedy to come speak here on a topic of economic development. Back then, and it continues today, I was writing about conventional way that we do economic development in this country, that we allow cities and states. Minnesota does this, Massachusetts was doing this. We try to take jobs from other cities and other states. We had an example that, a nationwide example that was going on where the Mercedes was coming to the U.S. and they pitted a bunch of southern states against each other. And Alabama, quote, won by giving up close to $200,000 per job to get that Mercedes plant in Alabama. What was interesting, that Mercedes plant was coming to one of the states, but they pit one state against another. It turned out Raytheon here was thinking of leaving and going to a southern state. There were some big offers coming from other southern states. Massachusetts didn't want to lose those jobs. Senator had me out here to talk about something's flawed with this whole system. From a national perspective, we spend billions of dollars in the name of economic development, and from a national perspective, not one new job is created. We move them around. Now, the best at this game are your professional sports teams. In Minnesota today, I'll get back to this, we've got a $5 billion deficit, and yet it looks like there's a good chance we're going to fund a new Viking stadium for $1 billion. And then in the name of job creation, quality of life, and lots of other things, but the fact remains from a local perspective, I understand it, but from a national perspective, something is wrong with the way we're spending billions of dollars in economic development. In fact, from a national perspective, it's a zero public return. I can beat 0. I can beat 5.8. Early childhood development is economic development. Another reason I want you to think about it as economic development, if you look at the countries since post-World War II that have been the economic miracles, whether it's South Korea, whether it's Japan, whether it's India or China today, a major component of their success is their investment in human capital, in education. So education is critical. High-quality workforce is critical. Minnesota's got one of the best economies in this country. We have one of the most educated workforces in the country. So again, my bottom line here for you is education, training is huge for sustainable economic growth. It's why we see so many economic miracles, why we see some of these very, very poor countries 50 years ago are now competing with the U.S. It's critical that we invest in human capital, and the best investment, something we've overlooked in this country so many years, despite this research, is it has to start at the beginning. So that was the policy, that was the bottom line. Now we started to get challenged by people to say, okay, well, that sounds great in theory, that's the research, how do you put it in practice? And one of the first mentors of mine that challenged me, based on a talk I gave here in Boston a number of years ago, was a man many of you may know as Jack Shunkoff, who said, Art, you looked at the Perry Preschool, those are 3- and 4-year-olds. For most of the kids you're talking about, at least for many of them, it's too late. I said, Jack, I'm not sure what you're talking about. He says, he wanted to show me the work that the neuroscientists were doing on brain development. At the very beginning, even prenatal, that brain development is critical in those first 3-4 years. And if a child's in a stressful environment, and by stress I want you to think poverty, that brain doesn't develop properly. In the extreme case, studies that were done on the Romanian orphans, extreme stress, extreme neglect, the brain was about a third smaller than what it should be. These are very poignant results, which the challenge for bringing this research to policy, the first challenge is you better start early. You better engage the parent. We hear about fade-out effects. Well, you're going to get a fade-out effect if all you're doing is taking the child and putting him into an early ed, it could be a very good early ed program, and then go back to a stressful, dysfunctional environment. So you better be working with the family. Perry Preschool was a good example of the critical nature of getting the parents engaged and empowered. Better be high quality. You can't get these results. Research is clear. You can't get these results if it's not a high quality program. You better be able to bring it to scale. Another one of my mentors who's become very famous is Jeffrey Canada, who does an incredible program in Harlem, and his whole mission when he started out was if he was only doing this for 100 kids in Harlem, he was failing. 200 kids, you have to do this for all the kids. And of course, I'm the economist, and I'm telling you there's a 16% return. I can tell you my buddies in the banking industry, various types of angel investors, if they saw a 16% return, it would not go unfunded. It wouldn't. So So these are real challenges when you think about it. And how do you create a system that meets these challenges? Okay, so you got a couple economists, Grunwald and Rolnick, and we've got these challenges. So what sort of system are we going to come up? Well, it shouldn't surprise you. We're going to argue for a market-based approach. So our second essay pushed this market-based approach. We put it out there and said, we think this would be a good approach to meet many of these challenges. Happy to see alternative approaches, but we claim that this one will beat these challenges. So what is this approach? It's very simple. Actually, we stole these ideas from higher ed. We provide scholarships. Scholarships not for 18-year-olds to go to college. Scholarships for our poverty kids. We call them now, not our at-risk kids, we call them our high-return children. We provide scholarships for our high-return children so their parents can send them to a high-quality program. Now you're going to say to me, well, wait a minute, Rolnick, that's 3 and 4-year-olds. What about prenatal to 3, those critical years for brain development? So there we borrow the literature on home visiting nurses. This is David Olds, longitudinal studies. Again, incredible results when you get to those parents, prenatal. Make sure those kids are healthy. With home visiting nurses, nurses that are qualified to go into these homes. Olds shows, again, randomized control group, that you can reduce infant mortality, reduce low birth weights. The health of these kids, 3-4 years out, significantly improved compared to a control group. And along with high quality early ed, there's no achievement gap. These kids will do very well. In fact, since the Olds work, my wife's an epidemiologist, so I get involved in the public health, and she's forcing me to read all this literature. And NIH is finding a high correlation between your health metrics prenatal to 3 and your health today, whether it's heart disease, whether it's depression, whether it's diabetes, which I think eventually is going to revolutionize the way we think about health care in this country. But recognize how critical that is. So we've got home visiting nurses. We call it Scholarship Plus. Okay, so that was the proposal. I was fortunate. The chair of Twin Cities United Way heard me speak on this issue, asked me to speak to the board. He kind of bought these ideas. His name is Warren Staley. Warren Staley was not just the chair of United Way, he was the CEO of the Cargill Company, one of the most successful private companies in the world. And Warren, with his leadership, created the Minnesota Early Learning Foundation. I'm on the board with the CEO of Best Buy, with the CEO of Ecolab, with the CEO of General Mills, with the CEO of the Taylor Corporation. They own the NBA team. With a man by the name of Charlie Weaver. Charlie Weaver is the executive director of an organization in Minnesota called the Business Partnership. Represents 110 of the top corporations in Minnesota. President of the University of Minnesota is on this board. Oh, let me just mention one thing about Charlie Weaver. Charlie was a former chief of staff for Tim Pawlenty, our former governor, who's now looks like he's going to be a presidential candidate. So we have a very distinguished board, and what did we do? They kind of bought my argument, and they went out and raised $20 million privately to do a couple things. 2 major things. One is to create a rating system. Again, we needed high quality, so we created a rating system, a 4-star rating system. And we told the providers it's all voluntary, but if you want our scholarship kids, you've got to be a 3 or 4-star rated program. And then we circled a neighborhood in St. Paul. It's known as the Frogtown neighborhood. It's a very diverse neighborhood, mostly, if not all, poverty families. And we have given out 625 mentor scholarship plus in that community. So we took a neighborhood, we kind of circled, we wanted it confined, we wanted to inundate it with these services, and we wanted to empower all these parents. Brought an outside evaluator, SRI, formerly Stanford Research Institute, to do the evaluation. MELF, you can go to our website, all what I'm telling you is online. MELF was a 5-year commitment from these CEOs. We will sunset next year. We're starting to get the first results of our kids. We've done focus groups with our families. Our kids will knock your socks off. Wait till you hear from our parents. And I'll tell you why. Our parents, we asked them, what did they think of the mentors? They loved the mentors. What did you think of the scholarship? They couldn't believe how user-friendly it was. Because if you get a scholarship from MELF, we don't care if you move. We don't care if you win the lottery the next day. It is yours. My critics said a lot of these parents not that engaged, probably won't use the scholarship. Every parent that got a scholarship in Frogtown used it. Every parent. Their biggest concern, and most of these parents didn't graduate high school. Their biggest concern when we met them, when we talked to them in our focus groups, is will K through 3 be as good as early ed programs that we're going to? I declared victory. If I've got parents now that engaged, worried about their kids' education, we've got a great chance of making sure there is no fade out. And we're working with the St. Paul schools. They're great. Superintendent is great there. It's going to be a challenge for them. They're not used to having poverty kids coming ready to learn with engaged parents. Better change some expectations there, people. And we're going to track these kids. And one of the things I'm at the University of Minnesota, we're going to have our longitudinal study, and we're going to make sure these kids are ready. We have a readiness tool that we assess our kids in Minnesota. That's also online. You can go to the Minnesota Department of Education. So our kids will be assessed. We'll be able to know how many of our kids are school ready. There's some other pilots going on in Minnesota. Every pilot that we've been involved in, when the kids start kindergarten, they pass that test. It's interesting. 50% of the kids in Minnesota do not pass that test. 50%. It tests social skill, cognitive skills, and social skills. Both are very important. James Heckman, Nobel laureate, will tell you the cognitive skills are probably more important. Well, this tool tests that. We've also done an evaluation of this tool. It's very predictive of third grade proficiency. So we're almost positive we've got the research to show that we can do this. You empower the parents, and I say the parents are empowered. A third of our parents go to Head Start, got a great Head Start program. Some go to Montessori, some go to interfaith programs. We don't tell we tell them they got to be rated, they have to have certain inputs, but it's up to them to decide how to teach the kids. We don't think one size fits all. We'll let the parents make that decision, and they're empowered to do that. Changes the paradigm from what it is now. All right, my time is running out, so let me conclude by getting into the political aspects of this issue. Because all this, in my view, the research is overwhelming. We know how to do this. Go visit Jeffrey Canada in Harlem. Those kids are amazing. There's no achievement. Harvard's done an evaluation of his kids in the 3rd, 4th grade. There's no achievement gap. And what that movie, Waiting for Superman, missed is his success was coming because they started with these kids, some of them at birth. It's the baby college that works for him. So we know how to do this. So question, why aren't we doing that today? It's not that expensive to do. So for example, in Minnesota, our proposal to bring this to scale is to create an endowed fund. Minnesota's lucky. We actually have an endowed fund for education. When Minnesota became a state in 1858, federal government gives the state, it's called a land grant. Today it has to be used for education. The proceeds have to be used for education. It's about $600 million today. And it spins off about $20 or $30 million for K through 12. So my governor, Governor Pawlenty, who was a no tax increase governor, I said to the governor, I have a way to fund high quality early education for all our poverty kids in this state in perpetuity, and you don't have to raise taxes. So I got his ear. She says, how? So I said, well, you've got this school land trust fund. I want to, right now it is earmarked for K through 12. I want to change the earmark to early ed. And I've got commitments from Washington that if the state comes up with $600 million, Washington will match $600 million. And then I have a commitment from my CEOs on MELF that if the state comes up with $600 million and the federal government comes up with $600 million, they'll do a capital campaign, just like we do for the University of Minnesota, to build new facilities, physical capital for human capital, another $600 million from the private sector. So $600 million from the private sector, $600 million from the federal government, $600 million from the state that's already there. Now I got my $1.8 billion. $1.8 billion delivers Scholarship Plus for every child in Minnesota, every poverty child in perpetuity. Now I know you might say to me, $1.8 billion sounds like a lot of money. State of Minnesota, generates $280 billion a year in gross state product every year. We're talking a one-time $1.8 billion. And finally, just let me conclude to put it in perspective, because many of the leaders in Minnesota say, look, Art, we agree with you on early ed, but we think stadiums are very important. We can do both. We can do both. This is the publisher of our major newspaper who made this argument 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we made this argument. Over the last 10 years, we've spent $100 million on the Timberwolves. We spent $110 million on the Minnesota Wild. We spent over $300 million on the Twins. We're going to spend close to $8 billion on the Vikings. What do you mean we can have both? So for the cost of stadiums and arenas, $1.8 billion, we can educate and make sure all our kids succeed in Minnesota. Thank you very much. Sure. Our leader, John, here says we have time for a couple quick questions. And if they're easy ones, I'll be happy to handle it. Otherwise, I'm going to turn to John. Yes?
Was there any nutrition component to the work you were doing in the early childhood?
Okay, so the question is nutrition components. Now, understand we're on a learning curve here. I'm particularly on a learning curve. Our home visiting nurses are wraparound. They do it all. So they come in there and they're trained to do nutrition, to work on medication, to connect, to actually work on financial literacy as well, to reduce stress in that family. And nutrition starts prenatal, as you suggest, but it's more than nutrition. Some of the work that's been done on the prenatal, they point out that if the mom is getting the right nutrition, but there's still an awful lot of stress in the family, there's still problems. So it's a combination of nutrition and reducing stress. And of course, Jack Shunkoff is going to tell you that stress is such, especially extreme stress, is so deleterious to the development of these children. So it's supposed to be. So yes, through our home visiting nurses, yes, we are working on nutrition all the way. And our home visiting nurses stay with the family. It isn't just for 6 months or 9 months. They customize the needs, so they may go for 3 years, 5 years. It is a long-term commitment because we're dealing with, they have to deal with obesity, they have to deal with dental care. There's a whole array of issues that are wrapped around this. Do you want to follow up? Sure.
Yeah, sorry, I should be more specific. I guess more like nutrition assistance, because I agree with you that the stress, the financial stress and worry about meeting basic needs is kind of where I'm coming at it from. Not necessarily just nutrition education, but helping people get, SNAP or WIC or whatever benefits that can help them pay for the right nutrition.
Yeah. So again, I think we're in agreement. The question is, how broad is this coverage? And again, I just want to stress that the ideal program is a home visiting nurse that is with that family and stays with that family to do exactly what you're saying. And it's going to vary. And we're going to customize it to the family, just like I argue in terms of early ed programs, one size fits all. Home visiting nurses are going to vary, and sometimes they'll triage. They may not need the healthcare component that much, and they may turn it over to an educator, so it could vary. We'll have more research and results on what we're doing in St. Paul, and then I mentioned there's some other pilots who are already getting some work back on this. So there's a lot more to learn. You can't go too far wrong, though, starting this way. Yeah, thank you. Yes? I think they want the mic. We have a mic for you.
A few years ago, I did a federal review of your Head Start program. I was extremely pleased and surprised by how coordinated all your mental health services were across the city and how many people were involved, all of the people were involved in anything to do with mental health. I was also very impressed because I didn't realize that Minnesota had such a huge Hmong population, yes, and that you had really incorporated all kinds of incredible services for this very different population than most of us here in Boston know about. I'd like to just have you speak a little bit how you got those mental health people all together.
I'd like to take credit for it, but I had nothing to do with it. Minnesota's always been a very progressive state in politically and business-wise. Our health, our HMOs are, we were some of the first HMOs in this country, and I think it's a combination of that kind of leadership. I want to speak to one particular person who I'm very close with, Mary Brainerd, who heads Health Partners. And they're well aware of the incredible importance of the early years and the mental health issues of the mom, in particular those early years. So I'm just going to tell you, we've always had a very community-minded society in Minnesota, and I think that's where it comes from. It's because it's not just in the healthcare field. I mean, it's very interesting. When I go around the country, they can't believe we got an early learning foundation that's mostly made up of business people that are willing to put their resources and their time into this. So again, I'd like to take credit for it, but it really is coming out of, I think, a very progressive. We got one more question. Yes. Let's wait for that, Mike.
How did you build support for professional development for the high-quality programming? A lot of research shows that teachers need to have degrees. And how did you guys, do you have a return on investment model for that? And how did you fund that professional development in Minnesota?
Okay, so the question is professional development. And I can tell you, when I first proposed this idea for Frogtown, again, very low-income area, my critics said, look, Rolnick, that we don't have 3 4-star programs at Frogtown. We don't have enough professionals. Well, it was so interesting. As soon as we announced that 625 families were going to have scholarships paying up to $13,000 a year, it's amazing how quick the market responded. So within 6 months, a private early ed company that's called New Horizon opened up a brand new facility in Frogtown. They never had. Now this is real economic development. This is economic development that pays over and over again. It's in Frogtown. And what are they doing? They went out, and because it's a relatively small amount of families, there was no problem finding qualified professionals, whether they were early ed or home visiting nurses. There's a 7-county home visiting nurse program, home visiting program with nurses and educators. We have an abundance of qualified people right now. Now, the issue is going to be when we go statewide, how do we do this? So we have support from the University of Minnesota and from our general college system to bump up their programs. The state has agreed to provide resources for that. United Way, Twin Cities United Way, is working with every one of our programs that we fund to help them with quality and to fund quality and to fund more programs for educators, so that we have enough 3 4-star rated programs. So that is coming from some nonprofits. United Way is leading the way. But part of it is being driven by the market. The demand is there. If you were to go out to my suburb where I live out in the western suburbs, very wealthy, lots of qualified programs, lots of qualified people. So I'm going to argue, if there's money available through the parent scholarships, the supply will respond. And I can tell you our educational system is already responding. Good question. Thank you. Thank you very much. Sure.
All right. Thank you so much, Art. That is just so inspiring to know that you can get such a broad coalition of people together, do it practically, and have worked out so many of the details about how to make it work. And to let us all know that not only can we make a moral argument that we all make, but that we can also make an economic argument that significant investments in young kids are truly investments, and they're investments with a very high rate of return. And one thing I'd add, actually, is I do think your rate of return is an underestimate as conservative, because nobody, to my knowledge, has looked at the long-term health and mental health outcomes for those kids as adults. And that is a huge ticket. So this is just so exciting to know that. I also want to thank the mayor, Barbara Ferrer, and the Public Health Commission, Mike Durkin from United Way for kicking this off. It's their partnership and all of you and the work that you do every day with kids and families that are going to make us successful here in Boston. I want to thank the Boston Public Health Commission and Children's Hospitals for sponsoring and making this event possible, and all our other supporters who are highlighted in your programs. Thank you so much. That's part of what it takes to make this kind of event happen. But it's really, you are Thrive in 5. It's the work that you do every day that has the impact on the kids and families that's going to help us all achieve that Thrive in 5 mission of getting every kid ready to succeed by the time they enter school, to succeed in school and to succeed in life. And it's working together. I know so many of you have incredible impacts on the kids and families you work with, and in many cases it's you working together, particularly, and I love your term, Art, for our high return kids and families. We have to work together because they need what all of us bring to the table that none of us can bring to the table individually to ensure that they're on the trajectory for success. It's that collaboration that is absolutely essential. I do want to highlight just 2 other quick things that are coming along with some leadership from Thrive in 5 and the participation of all of you. We are going to identify and announce in June a comprehensive set of school readiness measures, working with Boston Public Schools, early care and education providers, the healthcare community, and all of you. That is critically important. We need to have measures of school readiness that are as visible and salient as the MCAS is for K through 12. There's a tremendous focus on working in our K through 12 system because the MCAS says where's the problem, what the problems are, who the kids are, and we can target resources to make a difference. We need those same kind of data to highlight the issues in school readiness and in early childhood so we can focus our resources and track our progress. And last, has been alluded to by I think all of our speakers up here, we need to engage, empower our parents, our families, build their capacity, and build the capacity of our communities. That's the only way this work is going to be sustainable. So I want to thank all of you, but I'm just going to highlight some things. First of all, I do want to thank Randall Rucker, the chair of our Leadership Council, my board, for his incredible support, leadership, and friendship. Randall, if you could, what I'm going to do is ask people to stand and to remain standing. So Randall and our Leadership Council, my board, would you all please stand? Thank you so much for your leadership and commitment to Thrive in 5. In terms of this event, 2 people have really put it together. Cassandra Baxter, who's our one project coordinator, executive assistant, and Pat Duvall, our consultant who's been working with her, have done an absolutely fantastic job. And my small Thrive in 5 staff team, a couple of you over here, I don't know where you are, please stand. They are doing an incredible job every day. And there are just so many people. But anyway, another key group, of course, are the parents who are on our Leadership Council, who are on our Executive Committee. We have a parent advisory group. We have parents on our implementation partnerships and the school readiness round tables at the 5 neighborhoods. Will all of you who participate in Thrive in 5 as parents please stand? I don't know how you do it to keep your parent role as parents and your contributions to Thrive in 5. So I'm going to go a little bit quickly because our time is short. We also have an advisory group which we call an implementation partnership for each of our 5 components with folks who participate on those, and that includes our data and research team. Will you please stand? And you know, the other thing I'm noticing is there's a lot of overlap here. We also have our 5 Boston Children Thrive communities and the people on their school readiness roundtables and our lead agents there. As Barbara touched on this morning, we have our 7 sites. We're working with the Boston Public Health Commission to enhance pediatric services for kids and families. Will you folks stand? And now, last but not least, I want everybody to stand because all of you work every day. Come on, stand up with kids and families. You provide care to them, and you all care about kids and families. Look around you. It takes everybody in this room working together and collaborating to achieve our goal of universal school readiness here in Boston. Thank you. You are Thrive in 5. So now I want to turn that over to our panel here. Marilyn Anderson Chase, who's Assistant Secretary for Children, Youth, and Families at our Executive Office of Health and Human Services for the state, is going to moderate this incredible panel of people who can tell you on the ground how this work plays out, working with young kids and families, feeds into the Thrive in 5 mission of getting every kid ready, and bring an incredible amount of passion as well as that on-the-ground knowledge and expertise. So please welcome our panel here this morning. Thank you.
Good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm Marilyn Anderson Chase. I am delighted to be your moderator for this panel discussion. And in the interest of time, I'm going to move it forward fairly quickly. Those of you who know me well know that I could probably wax golden for about 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to resist the urge to even try to do that in the interest of moving things forward. I am really excited by what I've heard so far this morning, and I'm even more excited by the work that you've done thus far and the work that I think is before us as we contemplate how we ensure that our children have the foundation they need to continue on a lifelong course of success. The goals that Thrive in 5 has established recognize that fostering the early education and development of children not only requires high-quality early education and care programs, but also access to health care, basic nutrition, adequate housing, economic security, as well as the engagement and support of their parents, recognizing the critical role that parents play in children's development. And the goals that Thrive in 5 set acknowledges those principles. I am honored to introduce the panel that's before you today. The charge to the panel is actually to answer two questions. How are you and your organization contributing to Thrive in 5's mission of universal school readiness and its 5 goals? And what collaborative change needs to happen to achieve universal school readiness? Each of our panelists is going to speak in the order in which they are seated before you. I'm going to introduce them very briefly and just ask that they kind of speak in order following that. You unfortunately don't have their complete bios in their packets, but I'm certain you'll get a sense of who they are as they speak in addition to their titles and their job roles. And if you're interested in learning any more about any of them after today's session, feel free to approach one of the members of the staff, and I'm certain that we can get their bios out to you. Dr. Carol Johnson, I'm assuming many of you already know, is the superintendent of Boston Public Schools and a member of the Thrive in 5 Leadership Council. We're going to speed this panel presentation along in order to have as much time with Dr. Johnson as possible. She's going to have to leave a little early, so we're going to try and move quickly. John Barrows is Executive Director of the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative and a Boston Children's Thrive Hub agency. Dr. Sherry Nethersall is Medical Director for Community Health at Children's Hospital and a Boston Thrive in 5 Leadership Council member. Regina Robinson is a parent leader and a member of the Thrive in 5 Parent Advisory Group. And Yvette Rodriguez is Director of Head Start and Children's Services at Action for Boston Community Development and a Thrive in 5 Ready Systems Implementation Partnership member. Please acknowledge and thank all of our panelists for being here.
Good morning. I'm really excited to be here, but I do want to begin my comments by acknowledging the early work of Jackie Jenkins Scott at Wheelock College and Sandra Fenwick from Children's Hospital, who really co-chaired the original Thrive in 5. And as I arrived, they were presenting their report at the wonderful new Children's Museum, which really is a wonderful space outside of sort of our educational institutions to welcome young children to this community. I also have here today two of my bosses, two of the Boston School Committee members. Sitting next to me, John Barrows, who also is with Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, but also Marshall Rayner, who's sitting over here, and who happens to be in her other life program director for Head Start ABCD. And I have to say that working on the school committee, they really bring a strong voice of advocacy for the kinds of investments that Mayor Menino talked about earlier about what we're trying to do to really expand opportunities for young people. I'd also be just a little remiss if I didn't say to you that I had the wonderful opportunity as a former superintendent in Minneapolis to work with Art Rolnick, and Art was always a very strong voice, powerful voice, and I think most importantly because he was an economist and not an educator or someone who was an advocate from the children and families community, as many of us are, his voice was heard loud and clear from the business community, from the corporate sectors of the community, and he has continued, I think, over more than a decade to bring the economic data and the empirical evidence to bear. My son had the wonderful opportunity to work as an intern at the Federal Reserve when he was there, and so it's great to see him here and continuing his advocacy work now at the University of Minnesota. So we welcome you to Boston. There are a lot of things that are similar in Boston and Minneapolis, and I would say that among the things that are similar, Minneapolis and St. Paul area, the Twin Cities area, have a strong and similar to Boston international community. And while there are different groups, as Art talks about, there's a large Hmong group, a large Mexican American group, a large Somali group, and large Ethiopian group. So a lot of families from Southeast Asia, in particular after the Vietnam War. Boston has a large South American, Central American population, Haitian, and also Cape Verdean population in addition to. So over 80% of the students in Boston are students of color. And so I think that to some extent there are some parallels here, because both in the Twin Cities area and here in Boston, we have the opportunity to be just small enough in an urban area to really work together to make powerful changes that can impact the work that is carried out by our students. But let me just say a couple of words about how I see our work going forward. We are serving about 2,500 students in a 4-year-old program, some 3-year-old students who are students with disabilities, in an all-day, high-quality program where teachers have to have a master's degree. And so what you're going to hear from me, I think, over and over again, so it's a theme song, more equity and quality. More equity and quality. So we need more opportunities for students, and we don't see ourselves as the only early childhood providers. We work with a network of other early childhood providers, including Head Start, private providers, and we see that as really important so that families have choice and a set of different options that are accessible to them. We also recognize that Head Start offers an array of other support services that the Boston Public Schools may not be able to offer, and for some of our most needy and vulnerable families, we need to also learn about that and learn from that, but also complement that as students make the transition into the K-12 community. We believe that educating parents and making sure families are ready is an extremely important part of the work. This year, for the first time, we have created family guides at every grade level for 4-year-olds, 5-year-olds, so for first graders, second graders, third graders, so preschool. And what we do in those family guides, and we are translating them now into different languages, we have them in Spanish, but we tell parents what we are covering at each grade level. And then we tell them what they could be doing at home to support that particular learning. We have a major initiative around Countdown to Kindergarten, working closely with the Children's Museum, where we try to introduce students and their families early on to what the experiences will be like as they move forward. We have we made the decision that beyond sort of more, how do we make sure that the opportunity to learn is accessible to all children? There are huge achievement gaps between how our white and Asian students are doing and how our black and Latino students are doing. And those gaps start out, as you know, as early as preschool. And sometimes it is very difficult to catch up on those gaps when you start much later. So while we're working on the later gaps as they arise, we also have to back up and try to think about whether the opportunity and the access to opportunity to have a high quality teacher in every classroom, high quality learning experiences. We have been working closely with the Kale Institute, and 12 of our elementary and early learning centers already have received the NAEYC, the National Association of Education of Young Children, accreditation. We are working extremely hard to get NAEYC accreditation, not just in the pre-K programs, but also in elementary schools. And we were told recently by the president of NAEYC, who has been to visit several times, that we are the only district really working on NAEYC accreditation at the elementary schools in Boston, not just at our early learning centers. So we want more opportunities for students to learn. The mayor announced in his State of the City that he wants to double the opportunities in our Circle of Promise. When we began to look at our schools that were underperforming as part of No Child Left Behind, we noticed one thing, that almost all 12 of the schools, all but one, ended up being located in Roxbury or a section of Dorchester. So we drew a circle around that area, and we call it our Circle of Promise. We believe our children have promise, and we believe it is our job to encircle them with the right opportunities from birth all the way through in this circle. We don't have a gazillion dollars like Jeffrey Canada does at the Harlem Children's Zone, but we are committed, and we believe that there are enough resources that are already being deployed within our circle that if we were to target and connect the dots between those resources, we could make significant progress. So the mayor has staff deployed and redeployed into the circle. When people come to us and want to work with the schools, donate to the schools, we focus clearly on this circle. You're going to hear a little bit more about the Promise Neighborhood when John speaks. But I do believe that we have to be very intentional and very specific as we do more to try to create this equitable opportunity for all students, not to just learn, but to also do the pre-screening work. We also have several Children's Hospital as well as public health providers who come into those schools and work as clinicians to provide additional social and emotional help and support for many of the students that we're working with. We believe that data is critically important, and we have to have better information on progress. Many of you know MCAS is not given until 3rd grade. So what we are doing, and we'll be very interested in what Art Rolnick talked about in terms of the data tools that they're using. We use a DIBELS assessment. All of our teachers have handheld devices where they can continuously assess students and how they're doing on a number of indicators that we believe are critically important to the progress. 46% of the students in Boston come from households where English is not the first language. And that has huge implications for the vocabulary development necessary to read and write fluently at 3rd grade. And so I think that we should be intentional as we progress on this work and try to think about how we change as an institution, how we connect with other partners, and how we move forward as we try to do the best job we can. But I think that our work is really tied to these 3 main goals of creating more opportunities, making sure that those opportunities are equitably distributed throughout the city of Boston, and making sure that we have the highest quality educators working with our students and reaching out to families so that we can do a better job through our parent university to educate parents on what they have to do when they're at home. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm excited to be in a city with a superintendent that really believes in early education for our children. And in fact, the superintendent talks about the Circle of Promise and the Promise Neighborhoods effort that I'll talk about. But we talk about a lot of different things, but when it comes to the Circle of Promise and the Promise Neighborhood effort, she keeps hammering to make sure that we've got the early education piece right. She's brought partners to the table so we can have a conversation. And I just want to say it publicly. I want some of the folks in the room to hear that the superintendent wants to make sure that in the Circle of Promise and the Promise Neighborhoods work that we're doing, that the first thing we do and the most prominent piece that we do, working with Thrive and others, ABCD and some others in the room, that is the early ed piece. But leadership is really important in this work. And I first want to sort of say, this thing can't happen without the top leadership in the city. And so having Mayor Menino say this and do the work this way is very important. But I look forward to the day that all of Boston's work will be centered around early education care. in early education development, that the BRA will request that every development in Boston have some play space, right? If we can do LEED certified buildings, then we can do children certified buildings. That we think about a way that our children, that our city is designed to nurture and care for our children, because the investment and the return on investment is so real. So that's what we're trying to do to answer the question in our neighborhood. We're trying to figure out a way where we can design a nurturing community that is really taking care of or paying attention to all of our children. And let me tell you, I wasn't a believer some 4 or 5 years ago. You know, Jerry Robinson, who's a neighbor, used to always say to me, who was on our board at the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, John, if we really want to do some work, we should pay attention to early education, early child development, right? Because she understood that DS&I's work in our neighborhood, even though some people think about us as housing and the people who do, you know, community centers and other things, she understood that the theory of change around our work was human development, right? When I walked into the organization at the age of 14, living 2 blocks away, you know, I was immediately nurtured, supported into the young man that I am today, and that's the kind of work we want to do in our neighborhood. But she said to us a long time ago, we've got to start younger, right? Because we had the tagline that youth development is community development. 40% of our neighborhood is under the age of 19. And if we can focus on the young folks, we knew we could turn that neighborhood around. Jerry was saying, well, we got to start younger. And she kept saying we got to start younger, but it took a movement around us, right, with the Jerrys and other folks in the neighborhood to convince us, in fact, that neighborhood transformation is early child development. Economic development is early child development. Community building is early child development. Safety is early child development. And so, in fact, it's at the point where our neighborhood, our board, decided 3 years ago that if we were going to measure the success that we're having in transforming that neighborhood, we need to measure the success or the outcomes of children in that neighborhood. That the most dependent part of the ecology of the neighborhood is the child. And so the village is strong if the child is strong. And the only way the child can be strong is if the village was strong. And so if our adults were doing well, if our youth were doing well, if our businesses were acting in a certain way, then our children would be strong. And then more importantly, that the neighborhood would be guaranteed to be transformed if we can develop our children. Right? And so we really bought into that in a major way in our neighborhood and put forth that kind of vision in partnership with the Circle of Promise, our superintendent and our mayor, in our Promise Neighborhoods application. And what we're trying to do as part of that is build a neighborhood that's going to have some concerted, concentrated cultivation of our children. So we're trying to connect families to existing resources. How do we allow our families to access and get to some of the resources in our city? And part of that is putting information in family languages. It's making sure that we have access to transportation and access to some of the things that are basic in other neighborhoods that we just don't have in our neighborhood. In our neighborhood, it takes 45 minutes to get downtown. We're about a mile away to the edge of the neighborhood. 45 minutes. Most folks can walk quicker in public transportation. That's a problem. And we need to also identify the other kinds of resources that we need to make sure that there's more, there's quality, and there is
Equity.
So more quality and equity. I'm going to take this. I'm taking this back. More quality and equity. And so part of that is making sure that we are reaching out to the families that aren't on the maps, right? That all of the children that are being taken care of in people's homes, at grandma's, at aunties, at the neighbors down the street. And so we're reaching out. We've created an outreach plan to do real deep outreach to these families, because what we understand is many of these families don't want to be reached out to. They're scared. They're undocumented. They're off the map for a reason, right? There are issues. They don't trust the system. They don't trust the institutions. But those are the families that we understand we need to reach out to and connect and help create, bring resources to them, help connect them to resources, and help with quality and understanding of early child education and development. We also want to make sure that we're affirming those cultures in the way that they do early education and development. Learn from them. Make sure that we're not saying, hey, you guys have been doing this wrong, right? but we're providing them with tools so that we can empower these families and these home-based child care centers so that they can continue to learn and be better, but then teach us how we can be culturally sensitive and be culturally affirming. Affordability is a big problem. And so we want to tackle the issues around affordability. Affordability is a problem because in many ways, some of our parents are struggling with decisions around choice, quality, and affordability. Right? And we want to make sure that affordability will help equal access and not just say that these things are affordable. So is it affordable and are people using it? So participation rate is something that we're trying to monitor. But it all starts, in fact, and I think our keynote speaker, Arthur, really represents that. It all starts with us trying to figure out how we bring in different sectors that aren't seen as primary advocates to early education for children. And so Arthur represents, to me, new hope. I've never heard an economist talk about this and then talk about the returns to this.
I thought it was my good looks.
Yeah, and it's the hair thing too, but we So I was really inspired to hear him today and to put some numbers to it and hear him talk about the investment that the private community, that the corporate community is making in Minnesota. So I'm really charged, and I'm hoping Boston is taking something from this and we're going to have some change behavior. But we also need people to understand in different sectors, and not just the usual suspects, that early education for children will really, in fact, probably meet most of our goals of what we're trying to do to improve the lives of everyone here in our city. And Arthur represents that. In many ways, we've got to find different Arthurs in our city to champion that kind of voice for different, because they're going to expect that from folks up here, right? And so we've got to really create the scope of leadership that allows for the different voices to say that. And it has to start, however, with our families, right? That all of us need to connect back to our families, and it's the poorest, it's those who speak the least English, it's those who feel the least empowered who need to push forward as we create a cadre of leadership cross sectors in Boston to do this work. And so we're happy to bring that as part of our effort to early education in Boston.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sherry Nethersole. I'm a pediatrician. I work at Children's Hospital in the primary care practice there, and I've been a pediatrician in Boston for 25 years. My other hat at Children's is that I'm the medical director for community health. So I oversee our community health initiatives and programs, and I'm going to speak a little bit from wearing both of those hats because I think they're both particularly pertinent. In terms of Children's Hospital and what Children's has contributed to this issue, starting from the very concrete, as Dr. Johnson mentioned, our Chief Operating Officer and President, Sandy Fenwick, was a co-chair of the group that really helped to bring together this Thrive in 5 group and to really develop the plan for where to go with early childhood education here. And so I think just that commitment by itself speaks volumes to the commitment of Children's Hospital. And then, again, on the concrete level, lots of people from pediatricians to social workers to psychologists who served on the work groups and committees for the Thrive in 5 process. On the community health mission side of things, I think one of the things that our hospital in particular, but I think a lot of the health institutions in the city have done over the last 10 to 15 years is really sort of rethink what their missions are. And in addition to the clinical care and the teaching and the research that happens, to really think about the issue of community health and what's the community mission for the hospital. And so when we think about our community mission, it's really thinking of, it's changing gears a little bit. It's moving from how do we take care of the children who show up at our doors to how do we prevent those children from showing up at the doors to begin with. And I think that's really been a big focus of what we've been trying to do over this period of time, reaching out to work with community partners on the community health needs of children in the city. In terms of some of what some of those needs are, I think one of the things we really try to do is be very sort of thoughtful and careful about assessing what those community needs are. And that's by looking at some data, but that's also by talking to the people in the community and talking to community-based organizations and partnering with them. And over the last several years, as we've done this, the primary needs that have been expressed have been around health issues such as asthma, obesity, mental health, child development, injury prevention, violence. I don't think that list surprises anyone here. And so what we've really done is, as we look at trying to help address those issues, recognizing that we can't do that ourselves, but that we really need to partner with others in the community. So we do that in a number of ways. We do that by specific health programs, and we've worked with community health centers around obesity and have a thriving program there. We looked at asthma, and again are trying to reach out to prevent kids from needing to be hospitalized, and our community asthma initiative has really shown great decreases in hospitalizations and emergency visits for asthma over this time period. And in addition, mental health. I think we've really tried to do a lot of work. Our Neighborhood Partnership Program has mental health providers in 11 of the Boston Public Schools at this point, and I think that's, again, a concrete contribution. I think in terms of sort of switching gears a little bit to some of the primary care piece, I think there are a lot of primary care practices in the city, but in some ways there actually aren't that many. I think one of the things we need to do is create better linkages between primary care providers in the city and early childhood providers in the city, and early childhood education in the city. One of the sort of benefits of being in Boston is that we have good health care. Most children do have a primary care provider, and that's really a site where, certainly for the first several years of a child's life, families have steady access to consistent people that they get to know over time, and providers get to know families over time. So I think trying to figure out a better way to link the information, the resources, and share that information across sectors is really something that's vitally important. And I don't think it's that difficult when we think about the primary care providers in Boston. If you break it down into groups, it's actually not that many. If you look at where do kids in the city get their primary care, about 50% of the kids get their care in community health centers. So there are 26 community health centers in Boston, and they really do provide a significant chunk of primary care to kids in Boston. And that group of health centers comes together. So the Mass League of Community Health Centers and the Boston Conference of Community Health Centers comes together every month. And there's a vehicle right there for engaging that group of 26 health centers that take care of half the kids in the city of Boston. About 20% of the kids are seen in the primary care practices at the teaching hospitals, which is where I work. So between Children's, Boston Medical Center, Tufts, and Mass General, that's about another 20% of the kids in the city who get their primary care in those areas. And again, there are opportunities to reach out to each of those. And then probably another 20% through the Harper Vanguard system and the 4 sites that they have is where that other group of kids get health care. And then that just sort of leaves maybe another 5 to 10% of kids who either go to individual private practices. There's a small practice at Franciscan and Carney. So it's not, as you break it down and think about it that way, you can actually create large chunks of the population, services in terms of healthcare services where kids get primary care, they go very regularly, and you can make linkages between those primary care providers and the both communities and their early childhood community. So I really think that that's a resource and an opportunity that hasn't been tapped into enough, and is one that we should really try as we move forward to try and explore a little bit more. And really sort of set up these systems of care so that the link to community-based resources between primary care practices and communities are really thorough and engaged. The other issue is, I think, some information sharing around common terminology. So in primary care, we use we do actually a lot of developmental screening. That's something, even before it became mandated a couple of years ago, that's something that we were certainly doing. But I think the terminology that's used in terms of talking about child development in the medical field is sometimes different than how it's used in the education field. And we need to really come together and make sure we're using the common terminology and sharing information appropriately. And so I think, and there are a lot of other things in primary care that I think directly relate. Promotion of breastfeeding, early literacy programs like Reach Out and Read that are expanding and have been present in this city. So I don't want to overutilize my time, but I think really looking at how the healthcare system globally from a big picture perspective and how it meets community needs, and then individually in terms of how primary care providers connect with the community are crucially important. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Regina Robinson, and I believe the reason why I'm here isn't just because I'm a parent, I'm a mom, I do serve on the parent advisory group here at Thrive in 5 and on the Boston Children Thrive advisory team. And I'm also on Brigham and Women's NICU advisory committee. But I'm sitting at the table today because I'm a mom who just won't go away. I'm a mom who just kept saying no. My journey with Thrive in 5 started before I knew about Thrive in 5. I was sitting on a panel, something like this, at the State House, and I was representing my family. And I am a mom of 3 children under the age of 5. So I just should sit at the table just because of that. But I said no. I said no when a radiologist told us 3.5 years ago that our son had medical complications during my pregnancy and we should terminate the pregnancy. I said no because I wanted to give him a chance of life. I wanted to see, as one of the specialists told us, what he would show us when he was born. He was born and the diagnosis that we were given was different. Some people call it a miracle, some call it a misdiagnosis. But I know that Josiah is here and that's what matters. He's our second of 3 children. And I said no to just being another statistic. And I said yes to giving him a chance of life. By giving him a chance, now I have a voice for him. So I'm sitting at the table not just because I'm a mom, not just because I'm a parent who decided to get involved, but because I said no to the status quo. And I said yes to being a voice for my child. And I'm sitting at the table because I want to be an advocate, not just for my son, not just for our 2 daughters, but also for other families who may not feel like they have a voice to speak up on behalf of their children. I loved all of the conversation this morning revolving around taking care of our children from the start. My position at Brigham and Women's NICU is to be a voice for those families who are in a very fragile state, mentally, emotionally, psychosocially, and they really need someone to reach out and touch and to help them navigate the journey that they're embarking on. So I'm sitting at the table this morning because I want to be a voice for families in Boston. I'm from Virginia, and I just assumed in moving up here 5 years ago that people listen to parents. I just assumed, and I learned along the way it wasn't always the case. But I want to encourage all of us here who have a commitment to be a voice for families to speak up for those who aren't able to speak for themselves. Our children from 0 to 5 are so precious. And as a mom of children under the age of 5, I realize that this time of life is so short in the grand scheme of things. The last 5 years that I spent as a stay-at-home mom have been challenging. Yes, I've walked through a journey with taking a child to the hospital for open heart surgery. But I've also had wonderful, sweet moments of teaching my children songs and offering them a roadmap as Thrive in 5 is doing, giving them direction of life, offering them a foundation, roots to grow deep, character, values. 5 years is a very short time of life that we have to invest in the next generation of leaders. Offering our children wings so that they can fly and soar new heights than we have even been able to fly. So I'm here today to just be a voice for families, to be an advocate for children, but to hopefully continue the dialogue beyond today. Hopefully this isn't just a great moment in time where we can talk about all the wonderful things that our city is doing and we can look at our badges and see all of the different positions and the qualities that bring us to the table. But hopefully the dialogue will continue and they will become action steps. And we will look within our own families and the things that we were able to accomplish well within our own children or those around us who we are able to guide into life. And we can pour that energy into our community. Because when it's all said and done, 20 years from now, you and I are going to teach my oldest daughter, Jordan, my youngest daughter, Joy, how to care for the Josiahs of the world. The Josiahs of the world who can't speak for themselves, actually he can babble quite well. And he can tell you when he wants something to eat. But he can't quite necessarily tell you the quality of life that needs to be given to him just yet. So you and I are teaching the next generation how we are to take care of those who cannot speak for themselves, those who are in that gap. So I said no 3.5 years ago so that I could say yes and be in a voice
for my family and many families today. I'm hoping that collectively we are saying yes to being the best advocates, to being the best teachers, to empowering parents, to speak up, to live to the standards that they know they can, to encourage and engage them within their families, not just on their jobs and putting their energies into their work, but putting that same energy into their family, into their children, so that we can let our kids know 20 years from now, Boston changed because there were adults who cared and adults who wanted to invest in the next generation. As I was leading a workshop in the Ready Families group at Thrive in 5, an intentional parenting workshop, I gave 4 steps in intentional parenting that are my reminders and my markers as a mom. And the 4 steps are just to show up, number 1. Your presence is half the battle. Encourage families to just show up, be there. Number 2, to wake up. Get on the same page. You might need to nudge your neighbor and say, wake up, just to make sure they're listening. Get on the same page with your children. Understand what is actually going on in their little 3-year-old mind. Feel what they are feeling. Number 3, to set up. Prepare for opportunities to pass on principles and values. If you have been an athlete as I was, and you play volleyball, you know when you set someone up, you're setting them up for the spike, for the kill, to score that point. And then lastly, to speak up. I spoke about that earlier. Look for opportunities to speak on behalf of children whenever you're giving a chance. So I'm sitting at the table today because I'm a mom who just won't go away. And I'm hoping that you are sitting at your tables because you want to make an impact into the next generation of children.
Buenos días. Now I really have a tough time to speak after that. I'm pretty much speechless. And I'm going to use you as a reference, if you give me permission, when I work with over 200 for over the 2,500 families that we work in ABCD Head Start. I think she deserves another round of applause. And I want to thank Arthur because you just gave me a word to refer to the children that we serve, so I did some edits on my notes, okay? So to answer the 2 questions, and I'm very happy and honored to be here representing all the family of Head Start and that we have in the city of Boston. Head Start and ABCD Children Services, and it contributes a lot with the mission and goals of Thrive in 5. We have a mandated for 45 years to provide services and comprehensive services to the most higher return children in the city of Boston. Did I say it right? So all the Head Start staff that are here, that's a new term that we're going to refer to our children. No more the neediest family. Okay? Head Start has a mandated to do that kind of work, and we work with the entire family. We are very committed to work with the entire family, not only because we have them mandated, because that's the only way to do it. We cannot do it alone, and parents are the first and most important teachers of the family, and regardless of the situation, regardless of the history, every parent has the best intention for the children, and that's what we're going to work with. And in Head Start, parents are very involved in all the different areas, from governance and decision making, training, volunteer in the classroom, you name it. So I think in that sense, we are very committed and we are very aligned with the Ready Families and goals of Thrive in 5. We have been working with members of our workforce for decades. So we have an education workforce of around 400, and we are very strong committed on developing that workforce and investing in them to make sure that every single day we provide higher quality services and education to our children. And I think that also mirrors and talks about the goal of ready educators. And without families and educators, we cannot do it. So it's educator, and we have a couple of educators here, and I am very happy because usually they are in the classroom, so we have to bring them to this type of conversation because they are the one that really knows the needs of those families, and the families, the first communication is pretty much with the teachers. Through many collaborations and partnership, and precisely with the Children's Hospital, the Boston Children's Museum, the New England Medical, we are supporting the READY system. It takes a village, and John was talking about that, and it takes a village. So none of us here today can do our work for the children and family without collaborating, and we all have to be putting together all their systems and be ready for that. As of this work, support and sustain our chief goal of helping and develop ready children, Head Start goals are very similar to those in Thriving 5. We realize that no one can do it alone. And Thriving 5 counts on Head Start support and can continue counting with Head Start support in moving that mission and working with the children and family, because we want to have ready family, ready educator, ready children, and ready city. But most important, ready children. And while the children are learning through play, we have to continue doing the work that she said. And parents need us to continue moving that agenda. And in terms of collaboration, what I think, and this is my personal view, and like the TV, whatever she's going to say, it doesn't represent, kind of like that. I think we are moving in an excellent track. I think, and we are very happy and blessed to be in a city that the mayor has invested so much effort and has prioritized early education. It took me to move to Boston to finally do what I want to be when I will grow up, an early childhood person and an early childhood advocate. So I think we really have to have a common definition of what is school readiness. I think when we talk about that, a lot of people have different definitions, and I think if we really want to move this agenda, we all have to agree what is school readiness. It's not only about ABCD. It's not only about counting 1 to 10. It's not only about all those things. It's about providing all those services and making sure that families and children feel safe and all the basic needs are very well taken care of. And I also think that too often we work in silos. And although we have been growing in that, we really have to recognize that we still have a long way to go in terms of really coming together and working more and together. We need to understand and value the role of the different partners. And sometimes we forget some of the partners on the table. So I would like that every time that we sit on this type of conversation, we look around and look and see who is missing in this table, that it will affect and impact what we are doing. We need to align standards and outcomes for children at all levels across the mixed delivery system. We need to make a commitment to develop a framework that defines the necessary element of school readiness that meets both goals and Thriving 5 goals. We need to make sure that as we are getting ready for school readiness, we keep in mind all the English language learners. I am an English language learner. I have an accent, and I'm very proud to say that because, it's great, and we have to value and respect and honor that language and culture that children and family bring to our environment. We need to speak. Yeah.
You anticipated that.
We need to speak in one voice and deliver a unified message to policy makers and other stakeholders. And we need to do this now because children cannot wait. I want to finish with a small story. And last month, it was in February, I went to an event in one of our programs, and they were celebrating and honoring the Black History Month. And all the theme was around the Dr. Martin Luther King, I Have a Dream. So at the end, a lot of children volunteer and raise their hand and says, I have a dream. And this 4-year-old African-American child says, I have a dream that one day I will be the President of the United States. That's what we are talking about. That all child could dream and could have that possibility to dream high and dream that they are going to be great leaders of the nation. And we have that responsibility, and we owe that to each one of them. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to acknowledge each of our panelists, and we are running close on time, but we do want to take just a few questions, maybe 2 or 3. And if there are any education-related questions, I am advised that Jason Sachs is here. And I don't know if he knew he was going to respond, but he's prepared to respond. But are there any questions, quickly? Come on up, Jason. Any questions of any of our panelists? Yes.
Thank you very much for that discussion. I'm most interested, I'm very happy to be here with early educators. My background is in school health, and I'm most interested in the connection and the bridging that I worked so hard to accomplish, and now I'm working very hard to accomplish around a particular area, and that's healthy vision for children as they prepare to enter school, and all of the implications that having healthy vision or otherwise not having healthy vision might have for them as they continue their school years. So I'm very happy to see Dr. Nethersall up on the panel, and wanted to just agree with what you said about the importance of linking health and education, and I'm very happy to be in this room of educators, and I just would like to reinforce and perhaps support the conversation about how important it is that we link with the medical community, the nursing community, the health community around children as they are thriving, both as preschoolers and into the school years.
Is there a question?
The question is there a plan to continue to build these linkages and to continue the communication? Because I've spent so many years in schools where, particularly with vision, it's a very huge challenge, and we're taking small steps, but within the Thriving Five effort, is there an effort going on that's a very active effort around linking the basic good health of children with being able to access education?
So I can sort of answer that. I think, and I think that Thriving Five leadership can answer that as well. But I think, one of the components of Thriving Five is the Ready Systems piece, and that really refers to the healthcare system. And there are particular, is Albert here? Albert Cruz is the person who's pulling that group together. But I think trying to figure out the sort of systems to link those is really crucial. Right now, a lot of that focus has really been on how do you link development and encouraging good parenting in the healthcare setting, sort of having developmental specialists and nurses in that primary care setting and linking that to the home. But I think the next step in terms of actually linking the primary care practices to the school still needs to be worked on.
Thank you all very, very much for your attention to our panel. We are now going to transition to our breakout sessions. Your name tag, the number on your name tag, corresponds with the breakout session that you've registered for. So you should check your name tag. Panel number 1 is making it easier for families to navigate the system for children's success, and it's going to be in room 318. So panel number 1 is in room 318. Breakout number 2, closing the communication gap in early childhood school readiness, is in room 320. May I have can you just be still for just a moment? Closing the communication gap in early childhood school readiness, breakout number 2 is in room 320. Breakout number 3, you matter as your child's first teacher, is in room 322. Breakout number 4, children succeed when everyone plays a part, is in room 333. And breakout number 5, the great return on investment, is in room 340. So breakout 1 is in room 318, 2 is in 320, 3 is in 322, 4 is in 333, and 5 is in room 340. A round of applause again for our panel, and thank you all.